welcome to the Highland Park Spotlight. I'm your host, Keisha B, and I am super excited for today. I mean, super excited. It feels good to be on air, of course, be able to talk to you guys, but I have a very special guest, someone who I've ran into multiple times, and he's brilliant, he's smart, and he is the Deputy Secretary of State. So I'm super excited to have a Davier here with me in studio. And I pronounced his name right.
She got it perfectly, y'all. She got it perfect.
Thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to be here with me today. So thank you.
Yeah, no, it's my pleasure to be here. I live not too far from here, so Highland Park is always a place that I like to go. I always go grocery shopping up on Woodward at Gloria Market, so Highland Park is like a second home.
Awesome. That's good to hear. So hopefully you guys kind of run into him when you out and about, and you can say hi and you get to know who your Deputy Secretary of State is. But I did want to kind of just give a little bit of information to those that may be watching the show, who might watch later. But when people think of Secretary of State, and before I got into the world of politics, I was like, well, I know I go to the Secretary of State to go get my license renewed, to get my tags. I recently took my son to get his level 1 driver's license,
Love that.
So, and he registered to vote early, so he's pre-registered. So by the time he gets that age where he's able to vote, it'll automatically take place for him.
Awesome.
But that's the thought that majority of residents have.
Yeah.
So what exactly does the Secretary of State, Jocelyn Benson, and you as the Deputy Secretary of State actually do?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and just want to say thank you to you for bringing me on, but also thank you to your audience for us to have this conversation today. Hopefully, as we approach this election, is really beneficial for everyone.
Yeah.
Of course, the Secretary of State has a number of different roles. We have that driver's license, vehicle license plate role, and so the Secretary and I oversee the operations in all of our 131 branches.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So that every under the state law, every county is required to have at least one Secretary of State branch. Obviously, there are more in the Metro Detroit area because there are more people here. And then we also oversee elections, and that's our most important function right now as we head into the election in a little bit over 40 days.
Okay.
My role specifically, I oversee all of the policy for the whole entire department. So anything policy related, I oversee it, make sure that we're crossing our T's, dotting our I's. And then on top of that, I've got this public-facing role that I'm taking place right now with you all. Got to go out and deliver the message for the department, communicate to the public. So the Secretary and I split up those duties. And then in terms of election administration, because of my background as an election law attorney and a voting rights advocate, I often interact with our Bureau of Elections to make sure that things are being done in a way that is conducive to more people voting, and just interacting with our great team there and helping to lead the department.
Oh, that's awesome. So now this is kind of, you mentioned something and it kind of threw me off of the rest of the questions I had, but I'm curious because I know that you just mentioned that you were a lawyer for election law, right? Election law lawyer.
Yeah.
But how did that transition into becoming the Deputy Secretary of State? Like what drew you to this actual career?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question. And, when I think about my path to this moment as Deputy Secretary of State, I like to think about my mom. So I was born and raised in Michigan, but my parents are Nigerian immigrants.
Okay.
And when I was growing up, my mom told me about a story when she was 19 years old. They had the first presidential election in Nigeria. And the way she tells it, and it's always, the amount of time that she waited to cast her vote always goes up. It started off like 2 hours, now it's 4 hours, and it's 6 hours. So she's always telling that story, but she was in this very long line and was discouraged at a point. But she was in line with her father, my grandfather, And he said, no, we're going to stay here and we're going to persevere to cast our vote because it's on us. It's our civic duty.
Mm-hmm.
And when I think about that, I think about the fact that it's on all of us to participate in our democracy, to vote, to be involved.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I thought about that, I started to get involved. And I, in college, was involved with a lot of political activities. And then I decided to go to law school at the University of Michigan. And I started volunteering on voter protection efforts. And so I was just, a person who would be at your polling place, making sure that people were checked in and people could cast a ballot. And that kind of evolved into more and more responsibility until I eventually became Michigan State Director of All Voting is Local in 2020. And so that year we focused on making sure there were enough drop boxes available for people. We helped install over 466 across the state. Got MichiganDropbox.com stood up. But ultimately, we looked at election. I mean, that was a crazy year. We had a pandemic where people were dying. We had election denialism. We had people storm the Capitol of the United States.
Yeah.
And we realized there was still more to do. So we got together with a number of advocates to put together Proposal 2.
Mm-hmm.
And we put Proposal 2 on the ballot to ensure that there's early voting, drop boxes all across the state, that there's ballot tracking, that there's prepaid postage so that people can return their absentee ballots without cost. And so we got that done, and it got passed by 60% of the vote of the people 2 years ago. And I kind of thought, I was like, oh, great. My work here is done. It's all good. And then I got a call last year in February from the Secretary of State saying, hey, you did really good work with this Proposal 2. Could you come and help us implement this proposal?
Wow.
And so that's how I ultimately was appointed Deputy Secretary of State by Jocelyn Benson.
That is amazing. That's huge. And I think that was a great story, especially for those of the younger generation that's trying to, find their way in politics because, they think, oh, well, it don't really matter. What I do don't really matter. And it does, and you leave an impression. That was a huge impression because if she calls you, that's a huge thing, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so speaking of election integrity, so November, we have this huge election coming up, the general. And we have to make our way to the polls to vote for the next president of the United States. And it's a heavy weight. Yeah. It's a heavy weight.
It's a big deal.
What measures are currently in place to ensure election integrity here in Michigan? And how does your office work to combat the misinformation related to voting?
Yeah, so part of what we're doing to combat the misinformation is having conversations like this.
Okay.
We're also doing a number of town halls with the Attorney General all across the state. We're doing a total of 16 to just get the information out. And we're also getting a lot of things on social media to just make sure the word is out about what is real and what is not real. But in terms of what we're doing in terms of election integrity, I think about voter registration, how people cast ballots, and how those ballots are ultimately counted and certified. So we have something unique in Michigan, the motor voter law. And that is, I love to lift that up because now that it's across the whole entire country, but it started here in the 1970s under Richard Austin. Okay. A lot of people forget who Richard Austin was. Richard Austin was the first African-American Secretary of State in the country, and he was our Secretary of State.
That's right.
And he implemented motor voter, which allowed people all across the state to go to their Secretary of State office, register to vote as they were getting their driver's license.
Mm-hmm.
And so now we have 80% of people in Michigan can register, who 80% of people in Michigan who register to vote do so through our office.
That's awesome.
And that's crucial because when you go to get a driver's license, you have to provide your legal status, some documentation that shows that you're legally allowed to be in this country. And if you're not a citizen, it shows on that paperwork, and we don't put you on the voter rolls. If for whatever reason you don't register through our office, we have steps to validate your identity and validate that you're a resident of Michigan as well. So that takes care of the voting rolls part. Then the casting of the ballot. When you show up on election day or you show up an early vote site, if you have ID, you have to show it to get a ballot. Okay. If you don't have ID, you can sign an affidavit attesting to who you are under penalty of perjury. So if you lie, you can be charged with a crime, and then you get a ballot. Once we count all those votes, after when they are counted, throughout the early vote period and up to and through election day, the county board of canvassers, every single county in the state, all 83, has a board of canvassers, and they review all the vote totals, and they add those up and determine who won within the county and who won ultimately statewide, because they send all that information to us at the Secretary of State's office, the Bureau of Elections, and we share that with the state board of canvassers, and they add all the votes up and they certify it. And so there are all these steps of safeguarding our elections and making sure that things are counted in a way that's productive and ultimately reflects the integrity of the state.
That's awesome, because I know there's always somebody talking about, oh, well, no, they cheating on the votes but how do you really cheat?
It's hard. You can't.
It's with technology in place and, how the votes are counted, how can really someone trick the system, right?
Yeah.
So for those who have that thought process, right? How does that work, right? Like the counting of the votes, because people automatically think, oh, well, if it's people doing it, then it's human error. People can mess up. So I know this is off the, off the list, but how exactly does the counting of the votes work? Because is it computer where it's automated? Is it where it's a human person counting the votes? Because there is room for human error, right? But to debunk the topic of, oh no, they cheated or it's not that many, it wasn't that many. What is there to debunk that?
Yeah. So I would never say that mistakes don't happen. Mistakes happen. There are human beings involved in this organization, in this process, all across the state of Michigan. We're dealing with 1,600 clerks and thousands of poll workers on top of that. There are going to be mistakes made, and sometimes people are going to do things that are wrong. But we have safeguards in place to catch them.
Right.
And one of the things that I want people to know is that if you get a ballot, you're marked on the list as having received a ballot. And so we look at how many people signed up to receive an absentee ballot, how many people got a ballot on election day or through the early vote period, and we compare that to how many ballots we received.
Okay.
So if there's an imbalance there, we investigate that. We investigate that at the city level, the township level, at the county level, and sometimes at the state level. And usually when that happens, it might be a vote or two off, and that might be because somebody spoiled their ballot and they needed to get another ballot to accurately reflect their wishes. And it might not have been recorded properly in the poll book. But we don't just stop there. We also have audits of the process. So after every election, we audit the precinct results and the procedures to make sure the procedures were appropriately followed. We do that with absentee ballots. We do that with early voting. And then we also do something called a risk limiting audit. So we take, 4 years ago, we took the presidential race where Joe Biden won the election by 154,000 votes. And we looked at that and we said, okay, that was the margin. How can we verify that that was accurate? Because ballots are, of course, tabulated by machines. So we did a calculation and said, okay, we need to hand count a certain number of ballots to verify that margin. And
Okay.
we did that throughout the state, did a hand count, and it verified the results. Over 250 audits of the 2020 election.
Whew.
Over 200 audits of the 2022 election. And we're going to do that again after this year. So if anything happens, we are going to catch it. But I want to make sure everyone knows that there are safeguards in there, and we're all charged with a duty to make sure that this election proceeds safely and securely.
Yeah, because I just wanted to get clarification just for anyone who just had a question about how that works, because it's stressful.
Yeah.
And I would hate to be in you guys' shoes, because it's especially for this election, like, it's extremely stressful.
Yeah.
So I commend you. I commend Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson for all the work that you guys are putting into this. And speaking of that, I want to kind of tap into like voter outreach, right? For the primary in August, I believe there were just over 2 million votes cast. Maybe I'm a little off, somewhere around there.
I don't have a figure on the top of my head, but I'll take your word for it.
I did a little bit of research.
Okay,
but do you know approximately how many registered voters there is in the state of Michigan?
So there are about 8 million people
Okay.
who are registered to vote overall. And we're hoping, so 4 years ago, we had a little bit over 5 million people cast ballots. And so we're hoping to not only meet that, but hopefully exceed that this election year.
Okay. So are there any specific initiatives that's being done right now to increase voter registration and or voter turnout, especially in underserved communities?
Yeah, absolutely. So before the August primary, we sent out postcards to every single registered voter, active registered voter in the state, to detail the 3 ways that people can vote. Absentee, early in-person voting, and then, of course, on Election Day. So that went out to everyone. We also have launched a new social media, paid media campaign called It's So Simple, educating voters about the different methods. So if you're on social media, you'll see maybe an ad from the Secretary of State's office.
Yeah.
It's so simple, and you click on the link, it's going to give you more information about how to vote. We are sending our staff all throughout the state to educate voters in numerous communities, and then we're working with the clerks to figure out what works best in their communities and helping them educate their own voters.
Okay. So I like that, because there is so many people on social media right now.
Yeah.
It's pathetic.
I mean, it's addictive. It's a little addictive.
I looked up some numbers, and it was a little over 57 billion people that uses social media on a daily basis, and that number is just mind blowing to me. But over the primary, just being out in the communities and talking with people, that age group between 18 and 34 is one of the biggest age groups. Now, granted, they do vote, right? But there's still quite a bit of lack of understanding, really, as far as the voting process. Yeah. Is there anything that you guys or any organizations that you may know of that kind of gives information, voter education? Because there's a lack of it. And I've had quite a few people, it was like, oh, well, I didn't know how to vote. I thought I had to remember everybody's name. And it's like, no. And then I've had some say, oh, well, how do you vote? Because do you just put an X or a check mark? Like, they've never even seen a ballot before. Yeah. And what's some of the ways that gap can be closed with the Secretary of State and the residents here in Michigan?
Yeah, I mean, it's something that, I remember the first time I voted when I was 18. And even though, I had been politically active in college and high school, I paid attention to the news, I remember picking up that ballot and being like, how do I fill this out? what do I do?
Yeah.
And so it's, of course, something that we're trying to do on our end. There are a lot of materials on michigan.gov/vote, our main voter website, for people to access to learn about how to cast their ballots.
Mm-hmm.
They can also get in touch with the League of Women Voters. There's a website called vote411.org, which is a good voting guide, but also in the process shows you how to mark a ballot as well. And yeah, I encourage people to take their time. If you're a first-time voter, you might think about getting an absentee ballot.
Okay.
Because if you get that ballot, you can fill it out at your pace. And of course you can do that in any voting place, but there's something when you're at home filling out your ballot versus being in a booth in a public place.
Right.
And
yeah.
having that, and that's the first time I voted absentee.
Okay.
And I filled out a ballot, I took my time, and I submitted it. So, because it can be a little stressful.
Yeah.
And it is an important thing. I mean, voting it's the one way that we all, regardless of whether we're rich, poor, black, white, it's our one way that makes us all equal to give our say on where our country should go, where our community should go, and what direction we want.
Absolutely. So I know Michigan has some of the best voting rights. I mean, it's 9-day early voting?
Yep, 9 days of early voting.
You can register you can register and vote the same day.
Yes.
And it was something else that changed. And I can't think of it. My brain is just slipping me right now.
That's okay.
But how has the implementation of the early voting and the absentee ballots impacted the election process, and what challenges have you encountered since then?
Yeah, so Proposal 2, which passed in 2022, and then there was also Proposal 3 that passed in 2018.
Okay.
And those were two significant amendments to our state constitution, which transformed elections in Michigan. Same-day registration. So you now, through Election Day, it used to be before that you had to register to vote at least 30 days before Election Day.
Okay.
That's no longer the case. You can register up into Election Day, go to your clerk's office, register to vote there, get a ballot, and cast it all the same day. Like you said, there's early voting. There's at least 9 days of early voting throughout the state of Michigan. There'll be 16 days in the city of Detroit. But some of the communities will just have the 9 days. There's ballot tracking. So if your absentee ballot is being mailed to you, you can see that it's been mailed, and then you can also see that it's been returned. And if there are issues with your ballot, like if you forgot to sign the envelope, your clerk will contact you. And so that's another feature of Proposal 2. On top of that, we have drop boxes in every single community now. It used to be more scattered, but there's actually standards that we have in place to ensure that every citizen across the state has absentee ballots. And then there's prepaid postage. So if you want to return your absentee ballot or your absentee ballot application by mail, that's paid for by the state. So it's a really streamlined process to allow more people to get involved. But these are big changes.
Yeah.
So we had basically from 1994 until 2019, when Proposal 3 got passed, of nothing. There were no voting changes.
Wow, that's a long time.
That's a long time. So we're like accelerating basically 30 years of pent-up changes over the course of 6 years. And it has been stressful on our clerks. It has been stressful on our poll workers, and they've been excellent. Our poll workers and our clerks, they're my personal heroes because they're out on the front lines getting this job done. And we've worked with the legislature to make sure there's appropriate funding. For the first time in 30 years, the legislature appropriated money for local election administration. We have worked with our technology department to ensure that we have the technology ready to ensure that there's security within casting your vote, but also that it helps clerks do this in an efficient way that doesn't make their job harder. So there's a lot going on, but we're really meeting the challenge because we're all working together.
Okay. So you mentioned something about the absentee ballots, and this question came up before during the primary and stuff. But let's say a person gets their absentee ballot, and they like, all right, we'll fill it out. They put it in the envelope. They go put it in the box, and they get closer towards the date of voting, right? And they've gained additional knowledge about those that's placed on the ballots. And they decide, you know what? I want to change my vote.
Yeah.
Can they do that? And what is the process to?
Yeah. So absentee ballots are available starting actually this Thursday, 40 days before the election, up and through the election day or the day before the election. But you have anywhere between 8 days before the election and election day, that absentee ballot can be tabulated. So if you're going to change your vote, you can't do it within those 8 days because once it's in the tabulator, it's cast.
Ah, okay.
So let me just, one of the things that we implemented this year, because I know that was a little bit confusing, is that we did early pre-tabulation. So, in 2020, we had 60% of the electorate vote absentee. And it took longer for those results to come out because you have to verify people's signatures. You have to take it out of the envelope. You've got to move it back. There's a lot of steps before an absentee ballot actually gets put into the tabulator for it to be cast. Right. So we extended the amount of time that clerks and poll workers have to count those ballots from just election day to up to 8 days before election day.
Okay.
And so once that process starts, we can't allow somebody to change their vote because it would mess with the process.
Okay.
And so anytime between day 40 and day 8, most people in the state of Michigan can mail in their absentee ballot, put their absentee ballot in the drop box, and then go to the clerk and say, I want to actually change my vote. And they can. But within those 8 days, you probably can't, you cannot get that ballot back.
So they would have to go to the clerk's office, or let's say they do the absentee. Well, you did say 8 days, so wouldn't necessarily be able to do it within the 9 days early voting. But so they would have to contact the clerk and just make the clerk aware. And would they send another ballot to them in the mail, or would they have to go to the clerk's office to get another ballot?
Yeah. So if there's enough time, you can contact your clerk, and your clerk can spoil your ballot and then send you another one, as long as you verify that you are the actual voter. But I would encourage anyone who wants to spoil their ballot just to go to the clerk's office and do it there, because that's the easiest way for the clerk, and it's the easiest way for you to ensure that you get your ballot on time and you can you can cast your vote.
Okay. So times has changed, as you mentioned, and you guys are advancing 30 years worth within 6 of changes to the voting rights. Can you speak to ways to modernize the services offered by the Secretary of State, both in person and online?
Yeah. So, one thing I want to talk about outside of elections are the services that we have at our Secretary of State branches on the vehicle and driver's license side. When the secretaries took office, like a very small percentage of services were online. And we knew that if we were going to make the visits to our branches a little bit more easy on citizens, we had to make more of those services available online. And so now over 60% of the services that you could do in a branch, you can do online.
Yes.
And the newest thing that we just lifted up we just introduced is online title transfer.
What?
So if you buy
cool.
a car, for your friend, your family, or whatever, a private exchange, you can go online and transfer that title without coming into a branch. And so we're constantly thinking about new ways to ensure that people have the most flexibility in taking care of their business that comes, because not everybody wants to go into the Secretary of State branch. It takes time out of your schedule.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, voter registration. We now offer voter registration online. You can go to michigan.gov/vote and register online. You can also request your absentee ballot online. So there are a lot of different processes to ensure that folks have that flexibility, and we're constantly reevaluating that process as we go forward.
Yeah, I love the online portal because I do a majority of my work with the Secretary of State online.
Yeah. Me too.
So it's very convenient. But I have ran into some, because everything is going digital. A lot of our seniors and those who have certain disabilities aren't able to really do too much on the computer or have a understanding. So now it's set up to where I believe you got to have an appointment with majority of the Secretary of States in order to go in. Some of them get it, some of them don't. But how do you guys combat dealing with the senior population versus the younger population?
Yeah, so people can still come to the branches without an appointment. You may have to wait a little bit. But we allow people to come in and make what is called a same day appointment. Okay. And get their business done that way. They can also give us a call and let us know if they would like an appointment, and they can make an appointment that way. Oh, okay. So there are multiple options for people who aren't technologically savvy to still interact with their office, and they can do it the way that they've always wanted to by coming to the branches, or they can maybe get the help of a friend to get online and make an appointment.
Yeah. So they can make an appointment over the phone.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Because God rest her soul, she I took care of my grandmother for like 9 years. So
bless your heart.
She used to be like, I gotta get to the Secretary of State, and she would try her hardest to really figure it out on the computer, but at times she just couldn't get it. But I do love the new system and how things are going with the Secretary of State and how the ease of use is, right? So that's the biggest thing, is how easy is it to use?
Yeah.
And everything is pretty much listed there on the site when you go to it. And it's 12:30 already.
Oh, wow.
The time has been flying past.
Wow.
All right. So I know we got to take a commercial break. But I do want to kind of talk a little bit more. I know we wanted to hit on that point outside of the elections, but this is such a critical season, critical moment. I do have a couple more questions in regards to the upcoming election and things that Secretary of State is doing. So when we come back from the commercial, we're going to continue that conversation. And you have been watching the Highland Park Spotlight. I'm your host, Keisha B, and we will return right after this.
Platforms are engaged. Copy. Get ready to launch your show or product. Periscope ready. We're 5x5 ready to launch. Copy that. Trend worldwide across all major platforms.
Ignition. 3, 2, 1.
The world is waiting. Watkins Broadcasting. More than just TV. Watch WHPR and TV 33 when you want, where you want, how you want. WHPR is now in your pocket. Download our free app by going to the App Store or Google Play and enter WHPR TV in the search engine. And there we are. You can download WHPR TV or radio. You heard about it. Now come be a part of it. Roku Detroit Worldwide. Approximately 8 million viewers.
You ready to put your podcast on iHeartRadio? Yes, your podcast on iHeartRadio. What about Alexa, Roku, Fire Stick, Apple TV, Android, or iPhone? Plus live TV streaming. Get your podcast seen and heard all over the world. Call 313-868-6612. Pre-recorded shows are accepted to be archived. This is a WHPR distribution platform. Download the app from the App Store. Go to WHPRTV.com. Channels available for lease 24/7 on Roku, Fire Stick, or Apple TV. Coming soon, subscription and pay-per-view.
Also,
Block time is available. Get yours. Call 313-868-6612. That's 313-868-6612. Executive producer R.J. Watkins. Program director Henry Tyler. 107.5 FM WGPR HD2. RadioWeCanSee.com.
welcome back to the Highland Park Spotlight. I'm your host, Keisha B. And if you are just now tuning in, I mean, man, you are missing out on a great conversation. I mean, great. And you're going to have to catch the replay. So, but if you've been sticking with me this far, you've been hearing this conversation that I've been having with the Deputy Secretary of State, and it's been just awesome. We've talked about the services with the Secretary of State and what they offer. We've talked about elections, and we have so much more to cover. Well, not that much because we ain't got that much time, but I am super excited. Thank you so much for being in the studio with me again. I know I keep saying it, but I am truly just thankful for you to take time out of your busy schedule to be here. And I know you have a lot more to do, so I'm going to try not to hold you too much longer.
No worries.
But I do have a few other questions that I would like to add. So I did a little bit of research, right?
We love research.
And there's approximately 1.3 million Michiganders ages 18 to 29 that are currently active registered voters. How is the state working to engage younger voters, and what role do you think the next generation plays in shaping Michigan's future political landscape?
Yeah, well, that 18 to 29-year-old demographic is eventually going to be the majority of the voters. So it's their future that's on the line. And what we've seen is, even though the state of Michigan leads the way in young voting, 4 years ago, 54% of young voters cast a ballot in the presidential election. That was higher than the national average of 50. Now, that's still pretty low when you think about overall 71% of people in the state cast a ballot. So there's a gap there, and we've got to do more to ensure that everybody is getting involved. But when I think about voting and when I talk to people who are a little skeptical, I just had a conversation with some high school students at Renaissance High School. Okay. And what I told them is that you think about your life. Mm-hmm. You think about anything in your life that you care about, that you want change. It's ultimately impacted by somebody who is elected. So if you care about abortion rights, that's impacted by the Supreme Court, who is appointed by the President of the United States, confirmed by the Senate. Those are people that we vote for. If you think about inflation and economic policy, that's due in part to the policies that are put in place at the state level, at the national level by elected officials. When you think about gun rights and gun control, that's impacted by people who you elect. How you're protected in your own neighborhood by your own police department, your police officers, ultimately are accountable to the mayor or to the city council in your community. So that's all impacted by people that you elect. And if you don't get involved in the process, you're allowing other people to make decisions on your behalf. And I think that people should want to have some control over their lives and want to have some control over the direction that their communities are going in. And so that's why people should vote. But I understand, and I think people should not downplay this. Mm-hmm. When you are living a life where maybe you've got 2 jobs, you've got kids that you've got to feed, you're trying to make your own way, voting can seem like the last thing you want to worry about, the last thing you want to think about. And you can also say, well, you know, it's been hard for me. What has voting done for me?
That's the
and
big
that's real. That is a real concern. But every election is an opportunity to change. So if you're not happy with something, you can demand change from your local election officials. You can demand change from your congressperson. You can demand change from your senator. You can demand change from your president. And your vote does matter because, I mean, you and I are old enough. We remember 2000.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
The presidency was decided by 537 votes.
That's very true.
We know that there are local elections in this state at the city and township level where somebody wins by 1 vote, 5 votes. Mm-hmm. So everybody has a voice and they can determine where we're going. And I encourage people to be empowered and to take action.
That's really good because I used to be one of those people who said, "What has voting really done for me?" I voted in other elections and I didn't see the change. Right? Even when you vote for the person that you wanted to be in office, and you still don't see anything change. It could take a toll on your mental because it's like, does it really matter? And with the understanding that I've gained over the last few years, it really does.
Yeah.
It really does. So what you said, it just hit the nail on the head, and everyone needs to be engaged. And what steps are taken to protect voters from suppression? Because I know that comes into play too. Yeah. And how are these efforts being communicated to the public?
Yeah. I mean, so there are whole entire groups and organizations that are out there mm-hmm. that are geared towards keeping people silent.
Yeah.
Because they are afraid of what people who don't look like them, who don't believe like them, that don't worship like them, don't love like them, how they're going to vote. And so they're trying to suppress the vote. But within our office, we have worked to set up systems to ensure that they won't win. And so I always encourage people that if you hear of something happening, if you see something, please report it to us. Mm-hmm. And you can go to disinformation@michigan.gov, send us an email there of what's happening, and we'll investigate it. We also have a team of people in the Secretary of State's office that deploy all over the state during the early voting period, during Election Day, to be the Secretary's and I's eyes and ears to ensure that things are going smoothly. We work closely with nonprofit organizations to ensure that votes are being protected. I mean, people can call their hotline, 866-R-VOTE, to report issues. And so it's really incumbent on the Secretary of State's office, citizens, advocacy organizations to uplift those options so that people are aware of them, mm-hmm. so that we can investigate it, and we usually do. I have been involved in voter protection since I was in law school, and I can tell you that we have the most robust operation statewide that we've ever had.
Wow. And that means a lot, considering your background. Yeah. So I trust what you say. I definitely trust what you say. And so now as technology continues to advance, the online capabilities continue to advance, what innovations or changes do you foresee in the future as far as the voting process here in Michigan?
Yeah, I think that is to be announced and to be determined, because I know I can see all the clerks across Michigan saying, "Oh, what else he's going to be up to now? What else is he going to put on our plate?" I hear you. So we want to be cautious and make sure that what we're implementing next is actually going to make voting easier for the public, but also make the job of local clerks easier. But we're certainly, I think we're working with a lot of different, one thing that we're thinking about instituting more widely is something called ballot on demand. Okay. So right now, clerks all across the state have to get their ballots proofed and ready, and then they send it to a printing shop, and they've got to print hundreds and thousands of ballots.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of time and effort. And so a lot of the companies that we work with in terms of the voting machines have something called ballot on demand, where the ballots can actually print in real time at a polling location. And so we're testing that out, and I think it's going to be more widely used in future election cycles, and that makes things easier for the voter and the clerk and the state alike. So that will be something that we're looking to do.
Okay. I do got a question, so do you foresee, and could this possibly be something that happens? So there's software, right? And I'm a precinct delegate too. So there's, you can vote on your phone, right? Do you foresee that coming, for residents just to be able to pick up their phone and cast their votes?
I don't think so. And the reason why is right now, and I'm not saying that it could never happen in the future, but I think it's really difficult for me to foresee that, is ultimately you have your paper ballot as the ultimate backup to show how we all cast our ballots.
Okay.
And so when you cast a vote electronically, that's harder to actually see. Okay. But, things can change. But ultimately, we want to have some type of paper record that verifies how someone cast their vote.
I guess you're right.
But you're not the first one, because look, when people think, I vote for this, who should be on this music video, or I vote for things in my class, except we do a lot of things online. Yeah. We buy houses, we pay mortgages, we pay our bills, we do everything online except cast a ballot.
Yeah.
And people are like, well, why doesn't that follow it? And it's because we want to make sure that people's votes are being protected and being honored. And so the best way that we know how today to do that is by having a paper ballot.
Okay. Yeah. All right. A scripture just popped into my head, but I'm like, okay. As it does say, the right division. So what has been done to rebuild and maintain the trust in the electoral process, particularly following the controversy in recent national elections?
Yeah, let's be blunt. 2020 was scary for a lot of people.
Yeah.
It shook a lot of people's confidence. Even if your preferred candidate won that election.
Yeah. Because
of what happened, people feel like, well, what's going to happen this time? Are people going to succeed where they have failed before? Are my votes going to be counted? Is the vote going to be certified? And so we've taken a number of different steps. One of the things that is a little bit under the radar in terms of what we passed in 2022 with Proposal 2 was a clarification on the rules and the responsibilities of the canvassers. So we have canvassers at the county level, we have canvassers at the state level, and it's their job to review the voting rolls on how many ballots were cast, what the vote totals were, and to verify the results. That is a purely ministerial duty. So they're not allowed to say, well, you know what, I got some questions, let me do this investigation. They're not law enforcement. They're not a prosecutor. They're not police. is not their role.
Mm-hmm.
If they see something, they can, of course, call law enforcement, and law enforcement will investigate. But it's their duty to add up the vote totals and to verify what those vote totals say. That's it. Okay. And so that constitutional amendment made that extremely clear. And we've worked to educate canvassers all across the state of that fact. We also looked at our own systems to see what vulnerabilities were there. We've worked with national experts to ensure that we have the best systems in place. We've worked with Congress to secure funding for physical security upgrades. So I think we've taken a lot of proactive steps to ensure that the vote is secure, real, and the people themselves, through their own initiative, have done some really great things. And now we also have a secure auditing process that ensures that it's above partisanship. Okay. So altogether, I think we're in a good place.
That's awesome. There's so many different changes, man. And I'm pretty sure those who are watching or will watch just did not know about this.
Yeah, there's a lot that changed.
Pretty sure.
A lot of changes.
Because this is quite a bit for me just to kind of take in myself. And I know some of the changes, but just to kind of see how the Secretary of State and how you guys been so involved and behind the scenes really pushing the initiatives to, make sure that our voices are heard, number one, but that is accurate.
Yeah.
I don't want nobody saying, oh, well, no, you did this. Nope, that's not what I did. Mm-hmm. So one last question. Yes. It's close to that time. Can you discuss how recent policy changes in Michigan have affected the way residents interact with the Secretary of State's office and how these changes have been received?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I think all the changes that we've made through Proposal 2 and through Proposal 3 have opened up the process and have made it more, more accessible to people all across the state. That's the ultimate goal, is to make voting easy. I don't want somebody to feel like they have to jump through hoops to cast their vote. That's wrong. Yeah. And we are constantly working to make it easier for people to have their voices heard. I think the biggest change is, of course, been early voting, and that is something that is very common throughout the country. And I think we're the 21st state. Mm-hmm. The South, Georgia does it. Texas does it. A lot of states do it. Ohio does it. But it's new here, so people aren't as aware. And we saw some polling that showed that people who are 18 to 29, only about 60% of them are aware of early voting. So we need to do some work to ensure that people are aware of their options. And so that's what we're doing here today. And with our It's So Simple social media campaign. But when I think people become aware of their options, they're generally really pleased with them. But the key thing that we need to improve on is awareness.
And I did want to kind of throw this out there because I'm pretty sure there may be some precinct delegates that's listening to this conversation as well, or watching the conversation. And our duties are to help those in our precincts to know this information. And it was kind of disheartening when I looked at a lot of the various precincts in the state of Michigan and how there are no delegates in those areas. And even for my area, I believe there was 3 for my area, and I was the only one on the ballot. And it's like nobody wants to partake and help and educate people and give them the resources that they need. And I think that more people need to step up to become active in the political process, even just voter education, and just sending people, go to michigan.gov. It's just that simple, right? Because everything is online, registering to vote, getting your absentee ballot. You can register for your absentee ballot online. I signed up to receive my absentee ballot so that way I can make the process easier on me. But for those that's watching, and before you have to skedaddle, for those that are watching or listening, what's something that you want to tell the residents whether it's a call to action, whether it's some motivation or inspirational, whatever is on your heart, what do you have to say?
Yeah, I think it is real that people feel estranged from their electoral process and estranged from their elected officials at times, because there is a gap from where people sit and where they feel like their elected officials are. But this November is your chance to bridge that gap. This is your chance to let those people who are in power, including me, know how you really feel about things. And you can run for office. Running for a precinct delegate is like that first step. If you want to be a precinct delegate, you can be a precinct delegate. It's not a competitive election.
It's not.
It's something you fill out a form, you're on the ballot as a precinct delegate, and you're in.
You get one vote.
You get one vote, you're in.
Vote for yourself.
Vote for yourself. But it gets you involved in the system in a way that connects you with people who are elected. And that is your chance to have your voice heard, to say, hey, I think we should make this change. I think we should go in this direction. But ultimately, all starts with you casting a ballot. So if you want change, you got to cast a ballot. You've got to cast your vote. And so that's what I'm urging everybody to do, is to go to michigan.gov/vote, find out whether your voter registration is current, make a plan to vote. If you want to vote on election day, figure out where your polling location is. If you want to vote early, find out where your early vote location is. If you want to vote absentee, request your absentee ballot as soon as possible so you can fill it out and submit it either through a drop box, by mail, or by going to your early vote location, because that's like another really cool tool that we have, is like you can fill out your absentee ballot, go to your early vote location, and put it straight into the tabulator.
Oh, I did not know that.
That's how I cast my vote. It's the greatest way, because you can do all your research, fill out your ballot at home, and you just roll up and you put it in the tabulator after checking with the election officials there.
Huh. I always mailed it back in. I didn't know I could just take it up there. So that's a new one for me.
Yep.
All right. Well, I like that. I'm going to just roll up next time.
Yeah, just go to your early vote location and put it straight in the tabulator.
That's awesome. Well, I appreciate you coming again to be here on the show. I took a good hour of your time.
Yes, I appreciate it.
But it was a lot of great information. And I think it enlightened the listeners, the watchers. And I think this is one that can kind of replay constantly, because it's not just November, but, there's the local elections and state elections and all of that coming up. So people need to be engaged and they need this information. I think this was really, really good. So thank you again.
Yeah.
And I appreciate it. So we're coming to the close of the show and we have to go. I have to get back to work. So you have been watching the Highland Park Spotlight. I'm your host, Keisha B. I appreciate you guys for tuning in, and catch me next time. Now I got to go out here into these streets and do some work. I'll see you guys next time.